Let's get to Yellow, Richard. What do you think? This is our segment where we read the top 6 storylines from Saudi Arabia, and we sort of discuss them fairly quickly to sort of finish this up into the weekend. Sticking with the theme of trying to lead into this with a little bit more explanation instead of just
yes, that's very good. That's very good.
Saudi in a minute.
Yellow.
Yeah, I had to get. I was anxious to get to it.
Yeah, we don't have to give up on that. Just this person was just like, we couldn't figure out what was going on there. We thought maybe you guys forgot to edit that out. I was like, no, that's something we've done for 109 episodes now. So,
yes. and sadly, it's something I really look forward to every episode.
Sure, that's why we're here.
That's a pathetic commentary on but also now after you told, when you and Abdulrahman, were wandering around Alula, and when he would say Saudi in a minute, when you would say Yalla, now there are so many things associated with Abdulrahman, like his favorite sport, football and golf and that sort of thing.
It's so funny. He's obviously a successful executive, as we know. And the U.S., a huge major company, a huge U.S. based construction EPC company, and so he's very timely. He's very prompt. So, and I'm prompt, but I'm not that prompt. And so when we were going around Al Ula, he would sort of be like, "All right, we're doing something else now. What is taking you so damn long?" Wouldn't say that, but he'd be like, "Yella," and then he'd go, "Saudi in a minute." So, such a good dude.
Yes, first rate. Yella number 1, a White House readout reported that President Joseph Biden spoke with Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman about the situation in the Middle East region. The two leaders agreed on pursuing broader diplomatic efforts to maintain stability across the region and prevent the conflict from expanding. They welcomed the delivery of humanitarian assistance from Egypt into Gaza and recognize that much more is needed for civilians to have sustained access to food, water, and medical assistance. The president welcomed the Gulf Cooperation Council contribution of $100 million to support these humanitarian efforts and discussed the disbursement of $100 million from the U.S. to support the response. They also affirmed the importance of working towards a sustainable peace between Israelis and Palestinians as soon as the crisis subsides, building on the work that was already underway between Saudi Arabia and the United States over recent months. They agreed to remain in close coordination directly and through their teams over the coming period.
So this is interesting because you did have the Saudi statement as well come out, which was not the same, but it's good that they were talking. I mean, I think it's probably one of the more important conversations that happened last week between two high-level people in the region. Let me just read a few of these parts. HRH Mohammed bin Salman spoke with Joe Biden. Receiving a telephone call from the U.S. president, the Crown Prince underscored the necessity of immediate work to explore means of halting the military operations that claim the lives of innocent people. He highlighted the rejection of targeting civilians. Crown Prince emphasized the need for achieving calm, stopping escalation, avoiding a situation that affects security and stability of the region. I don't think either of us are experts on reading between the lines of the verbiage of either of these, but it is, I think, good that they talked. What I think was also interesting, Richard, is a previous guest of the 966, probably one of our top 5 guests in terms of how much we just enjoyed the conversation. A speech made by His Royal Highness Prince Turki Al Faisal of Saudi Arabia this week on the current violence in the Middle East also gave us a glimpse into some Saudi thinking at the top. Prince Turki gave this speech to a U.S. audience at Rice University this week in Houston, and the speech did have direct criticism of Hamas. He's sort of an elderly statesman in Saudi circles. Obviously, his resume is 100 pages long in terms of what he's accomplished, so he's very well respected in Saudi Arabia. And he basically said, that there were no heroes, only victims, that Hamas and Israel are to blame for attacking civilians. So he's one of the first Saudis, if he's maybe the only Saudi, to say that Hamas was wrong in attacking Israel first. You just got to be careful in the words there. So it's interesting.
And that's very good. And just for clarification, because I know that you want it, because Prince Turki is a friend, he would want to be referred to as an elder statesman rather than elderly statesman.
Wait, what did I say? Elder statesman?
Elderly, but that's okay.
Oh, elderly statesman. Yeah.
Well, no. And I'm just, again, but this is such a sensitive subject, and I have to commend Joe Biden. Um, I think in something like this, and you have you have the attack by Hamas, which was brutal and devastating in many ways, and you have the response from Israel, along with all the emotions that go with it. And you have to be aware, if you're the U.S. president, that anything Israel does will implicate the U.S. In other words, if you're looking at perceptions in the region, which Joe Biden is, it doesn't matter if the U.S. said, "Oh, we want no part of this," and did nothing, and Israel went forward in its choices. It would still involve the U.S. The U.S. would still be condemned or associated with the actions of Israel. So Joe Biden said, "All right, if that's the case, I'm going to get fully involved and try and have input on these actions." As you've seen him, engage with Netanyahu, who is clearly disoriented, and smarter people than I. But I mean, he obviously was shocked. He's taken no responsibility, which is sort of his style. He's allowed members of his cabinet to be very aggressive in their commentary versus with regard to attacking Hezbollah or basically devastating all of Gaza. And anyway, so he hasn't been much of a leader, in my opinion. Joe Biden has stepped in, and I think his reference to 9/11 is say, look, I understand your emotions, but we overreacted, and it didn't help our national interest in the way we overreacted. And you see Israel, still they're bombing, but they haven't had a ground incursion yet. They're sort of leading up to it. But in any case, I see the president trying to, and very much in line with the crown prince and Saudi leadership, trying to in some way control civilian losses, in some way achieve a response that won't engulf the region and trigger Hezbollah or other groups to come in, and also, to be honest, with an eye to what comes after. And we can't go into this too deep here, but I think Joe Biden has said, okay, maybe this is a horrible situation, and we want to try and control the fallout and minimize the deaths and the hardship and the suffering, and maybe we can come out on the other side with something better. I think that's what he's aiming at. So anyway, I see Joe Biden in his many years of his political career and his ability and relationships with Israel playing a very important role right now. And I commend him for it. It's a really difficult challenge because there are so many players here that have fingers on triggers that can make it worse, and they want to make it worse. And this includes, of course, Iran and others and extremist groups, and Russia would love to see it blow up. So we don't know how this is going to end. I really do feel like Joe Biden is doing an admirable job. Reaching out, coordinating with Saudi Arabia is very important. And I do believe Saudi Arabia and the U.S. are on the same page on this in trying to avoid expansion of the conflict and trying to minimize civilian deaths and the terrible things that come with what Israel's planning.
Yeah, indeed it is terrible. And I think what's happening in Gaza now is sickening. And I personally would love to see a ceasefire right now. But I mean, nobody cares what I think, but that's my view of it. I think it's just really awful. And I don't think two wrongs make a right. So I'm just like,
well, here's sorry to interrupt, but I mean, this was, and this is the thing I think most Americans and a lot of Israelis don't want to hear, but this is Jordan's Queen Rania was asked on CNN. And she said, was asked, as an Arab and as a Palestinian, a human being and a mother, how do you feel about the, October 7th killing and what's followed? And she said, essentially, she said, look, obviously nobody endorses what Hamas did. But she said, in terms of bombing of Gaza, it's a double standard. And she said, quote, are we being told it is wrong to kill an entire family at gunpoint, but it's okay to shell them to death, unquote. So I share this simply because this is very much the attitude in, the Middle East and the region. And I think most Saudis, most Muslims, are like Prince Turkey, and they can't condone the behavior of Hamas. But like you say, does this give a green light to do terrible things to civilians in Gaza?
Yeah, it's a good point, and just would love to see it stop 20 days ago, especially now. And so hopefully the regional diplomacy with the United States in there works. And this, it's horrible. So Yella number 2, FII. Richard, our timing of this, it's so funny. The last 2 weeks we've discussed this topic. It's extremely heavy, and then we have to go on with the show. And our next Yella number 2 is FII, happening in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. JPMorgan CEO Jamie Dimon, Citigroup's Jane Fraser, and other top names on Wall Street were in Saudi Arabia for the 7th FII investment conference as they try to look beyond risks that the Israel-Hamas war could widen into a regional conflict and deal a new blow to the global economy. Dubbed Davos in the Desert, the annual FII saw about 6,000 participants from more than 90 countries over 3 days. Now in its 7th year, the event has retained its appeal despite U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin warning Sunday about potential escalation in the Middle East and possible attacks on American interests.
Yes, of course they're going to go. This is 7 years in. It's a significant gathering. The Davos in the Desert now is actually legit. The comparisons to World Economic Forum, which sort of occupies its own space as the grandfather of them all. But this is a big event. And if you're going to be there, if you're a serious player and you want to be plugged into those investment opportunities. And and this was one of those where we put in there so we could sort of dismiss it. Mm-hmm. It's going to go on. And I think you mentioned that, this year they had membership fees maybe what, 15 to 20 people dropped out, according to the organizers, of the 6,000 registered. So yeah, people are there. It's heavily subscribed. Things are happening.
I think 15 to the 20 dropped out directly related to the regional conflict.
Right.
So, because that's not why I didn't go, but I don't think, I tried to email them and just say, hey, I'm not going to make it, not going to make my flight. And can I give my ticket to somebody else? And they were like, no, see you next year. So, we wanted to include this because I think it's good to know. I mean, it was a big news event, a constant stream of news. And it's part of the problem with FII is that the news making things almost crowd out some of the stuff that should deserve its own news platform. We saw a previous guest of the 966, Prince Walid bin Nasser Al Saud and Princess Rima bin Bandar, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States, do a deal for ocean preservation. I think we should ask them about that and see what's up, but really cool stuff there. Just a lot of good stuff comes out of FII. It's a really impressive event. So congrats to the organizers and participants this year for a successful event.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Yellow number 3. Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman said on Tuesday that recent multi-billion-dollar acquisitions by U.S. oil majors Exxon Mobil and Chevron of smaller rivals showed that hydrocarbons were, quote, here to stay, unquote. Chevron said on Monday it would buy Hess in a $53 billion all-stock deal. Less than 2 weeks after fellow U.S. major Exxon Mobil said it would buy Pioneer Natural Resources, Shale, for $59.5 billion in stock. Quote, Exxon Chevron didn't buy because they want to have stranded assets, said Prince Abdulaziz. He's speaking at the FII to keep the theme, adding that the acquisitions, quote, could not have come at a better time, unquote. Prince Abdulaziz said the energy transition will require hydrocarbons, including petrochemicals. The deals have drawn some rebuke from environmentalists who see them as undercutting climate goals.
Yeah, I mean that is undercutting climate goals. The climate goals would demand that we basically start phasing off of hydrocarbons, but it's just not realistic in the world economically according to these investments. So, more investments than needed into developing EV infrastructure faster, into carbon scrubbing from the air. But yeah, I mean they're speaking with their investments here. They're saying that this industry is not going anywhere. Don't have much to add. Just that comment.
No, it is interesting, and finding a way to taper down oil production and energy production, and in a manner that it doesn't disrupt key industries and basic requirements. We've talked about the fact that much of Africa, a significant percentage of Africans don't have enough power, oil or renewable otherwise. The other thing is the International Energy Agency, which the Saudis are not a big fan, came out with its World Energy Outlook this week. And you can follow all this, by the way, on Citigroup. We cover all this stuff. And they basically said, that oil production should start declining, oil demand should peak by 2030. And their point is that the clean energy economy is really thriving in terms of EVs and renewables. China economy is slowing, and solar capacity is really picking up. And so that's their prediction. Again, the Saudis, when the Saudis when they do their predictions and assessments and extrapolations, I think they have like a basket of 8 inputs of like Rystad or whatever, key people who track markets and that sort of thing. And then they come up with their own. They recently kicked off the IEAs as part of that basket because I really disagree with a lot of their predictions. But again, these are bets people are making. And it's hard to, you don't know that's why they call it risk. Making educated bets. And Prince Abdulaziz has said all along on the energy transition that we can't stop investing and making capital investments in the oil industry and the fossil fuel industry because it'll leave us hung out to dry. So in any case, we'll see how that bet unfolds.
Should be interesting. Yellow number 4. A boundary-pushing esports festival is to take place in Saudi Arabia next summer. The inaugural Esports World Cup was announced by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during the new Global Sport Conference and will be held annually. He was physically there, actually. He was there. Organizers claim to have the, quote, largest prize pool in esports history, and, quote, although details are yet to be released, the Esports World Cup will build on current gaming events in the country, such as the Gamers 8 tournament, which featured tournaments in various games with a total cash prize of $45 million. The Esports World Cup is the next natural step in Saudi Arabia's journey to become the premier global hub for gaming and esports, offering an unmatched esports experience that pushes the boundaries of the industry since Prince Mohammed.
It makes sense, Saudi Arabia. Well, first of all, esports is interesting. We found it interesting because it's organic. I mean, because so many young Saudis have been into esports, and then obviously the Crown Prince is very much into esports, as he shared with his, an interview with Fox recently, and something everybody sort of knew. So there's a native indigenous interest, in terms of Saudi Arabia, and over the last 5 years, Saudi has gone heavily into esports, and this is very much part of their playbook. A term I've been using a lot recently is, all right, if we're going to go into this, we'll invest, we'll try and generate and create and cultivate a local industry and capabilities, and by the way, let's convene the biggest show on earth. Because this is what they do. So the esports, that Esports World Cup makes sense in the terms of all the things that have gone on before, and also in terms of the very organic and real interest in esports in Saudi Arabia. This will be fun to watch.
This will be fun to watch. It's a meaningful contribution here. So I mean, I think I'm not an esports guy. It's funny that that's like now becoming like a real industry. Like I heard the other day that somebody's one of my friends was playing golf with somebody, and his son was getting an esports scholarship to college, and he had to sort of ask for clarification. Like, what do you mean?
How much does it pay?
Yeah, exactly. I can't remember what college it was. I'll have to ask this guy, but I was just like, that's hilarious, you know? So anyway, but it is big business, and there are a lot of gamers in the world, especially in Saudi Arabia. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yella number, is this me or you?
This is you, Cinco.
Is this five?
Hamza. Yeah.
Yella number five. South Korea's Hyundai Engineering and Construction Company and Hyundai Engineering have signed a 2.4 billion contract with oil giant Saudi Aramco to build a gas processing plant. Seoul's presidential office said on Tuesday the deal was signed on Monday in Riyadh at a ceremony to mark 50 years of construction cooperation between the two countries, with South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol attending as part of his state visit to the kingdom. I'm sure that's not correct. I apologize to all our South Korean friends.
You noted this earlier in the episode, but the Saudi South Korean bond right now is particularly strong, and that's kind of good for the United States because South Korea is a really very strong ally of the United States. This event this week that started right before the FII was, I mean, there was a lot that came out of it.
Boy.
And I think there's a lot of cooperation between Saudi Arabia and South Korea on the venture capital and developing entrepreneurship front and investing, especially with Saudi money going into South Korean tech. I think it's just like there's a lot of cooperation going on between South Korea and Saudi Arabia. So it's good to see.
Yeah, this, it didn't get overshadowed by the FII, but a lot of big things came out of it. And because obviously my one big thing was talking about an automotive MOU that came out of it. And obviously this is a huge, energy deal. And there were something like 50 MOUs signed on this. So it was a successful delegation, a successful summit.
I thought that it was interesting that, so Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman visited South Korea last year, 2022. And I think he mentioned it, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard or anybody, he mentioned South Korea's rapid development as a model for Saudi Arabia. I mean, South Korea took longer than Saudi Arabia is doing, but I think he mentioned that in the interview with Fox a few weeks ago. I don't know why I think that. Maybe I was wrong, but anyway, so interesting. Yella number 6. NEOM has announced today the inauguration of its strategic investment arm, the NEOM Investment Fund. NEOM's wholly owned subsidiary, which is set up to support the build out and development of NEOM's 14 priority sectors and deliver long-term value while enabling creation of jobs in NEOM. NIF, so like PIF, but with NEOM, will invest globally through mergers and acquisitions and venture capital and tech startups with a clear focus on pioneering growth companies and next-gen industries. NIF will also develop joint ventures and partnerships with large multinationals, institutional investors, and innovators in NEOM. By the way, we got corrected on this before, Richard, and just hearing it over and over the last week, you and I keep saying NEOM, but I think it's NEOM. So I'm going to try to do it going forward. So sorry for everybody. I did it there. So yeah.
Yes, we'll try, and I'm sure we botch all sorts of stuff.
Apologies. Of course.
We should do a blanket apology, a disclaimer right across the top, right across my forehead.
Yeah.
This is interesting. And there's so many investment vehicles now. They just a $200 million one that's through Coust, and there's a lot of other ones. Obviously, PIF is massively active in this. And then there's private sector ones. And I do wonder on the plus side, you can see how a specific strategic investment arm can directly go out and attract or engage or merge or acquire technologies and expertise that's specifically needed in NEOM. That's good. But I always wonder with all these investment arms how to track their performance. Who's tracking their performance? Because there's already I think in terms of investment capacity, Saudi investment capacity, local investment capacity, it's already sort of straining at the seams. It's already maxed out. So who's watching all these investments? and monitoring if they're effective, if these funds are well managed, that sort of thing. I'm not really saying it's going to be an issue. I just think it's interesting. So on the positive side, absolutely, So, NIF has already targeted intentions to invest in companies such as Regent, Pony.ai, Boom Technology, Blue Nalu, and Animoca brands. And there'd be details to come out of this. But, who goes back and does the metrics and the performance indicators on what your investments were? Who's watching all this? It's interesting.
Yasser Al-Rumayyan.
That's just it. He's at the top of the pyramid. Presumably, this is a separate entity and have its own investors and that sort of thing. But again, there's a lot of things going on now, and I'm assuming they all have monitoring groups and compliance and that sort of thing, and then they'll have performance indicators but there's a lot going on, and it's hard to keep track, especially if you don't have a extraordinarily deep bench of talent to do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like what makes it. I mean, this will be just like a standard VC fund in the way that's set up. But what makes it different is they have this like national. It's not like in the investment thesis necessarily, although in some cases it is. But they have this sort of national interest, and the number one interest in investing is making money. So when you have these other interests as well, it gets a little bit harder to, like you were kind of saying, measure success. Like, what is the success rate? Exactly. It's not just your ROI, but it's, and all these jobs were created. And then it gets a little bit hairier to keep track of. These guys have been operating in stealth mode for at least a year. They've made I don't know if it was their investment fund or just NEOM before this was sort of created as it is NIF now, but they were making investments into quadcopter technology. Not quadcopter, but EVOTL, this sort of drones that move people around. It's one of the coolest things I think of out there. So they've been doing investments sort of like this for a while. This sort of crystallizes the team that was working on that into an actual fund with, government money basically is backing to get these technologies to set up in NEOM. So in some way or another. So it's interesting. We got to get over there, Richard, at some point.
100%. 100%. Now that we pronounce it correctly, I think maybe they'll let us in. But prior to that, I think that was the last, domino to fall. Is we'd love to have those guys come over, but they can't say the name.
Don't let these white Americans come in here saying NEOM like a bunch of dorks. We? Yeah, exactly. Make them say it right. We'll let them in.
We'll think about it.
At the airport, there's just like, can you say NEOM? Yes, we can. Yeah.
And are you this tall?
Yeah, exactly. You must pronounce NEOM this way to enter. Good one, Mr. Richard Wilson. Thank you very much to AZ and Mo for joining us. That was super cool. Thanks so much to everybody giving us comments and feedbacks, and all the listeners out there in radio land. We appreciate you very much, Richard. See you next week.
Next week. Always grateful, always thankful. This is terrific.